My breath caught in my throat when he called my name. Brenton Colt stood at the front of the classroom, his expression unreadable as always, holding the list of project partners in his hand. Every student leaned forward, anticipating his choice. They expected him to pick someone polished, someone who matched his reputation as the most untouchable alpha in school. Instead, his cold gray eyes found mine across the crowded room, and he said one word that changed everything: Elvis. Time seemed to freeze. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me, some curious, others skeptical, a few outright hostile. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. This had to be some kind of mistake. Brenton Colt never acknowledged my existence before today. I was nobody, an average Omega who kept his head down and stayed invisible. Yet here he was, claiming me as his partner in front of everyone. The whispers started the moment class ended. I hurried toward my locker, trying to escape the attention, but the voices followed me like shadows. Why would he pick someone like that? One girl muttered, not bothering to lower her voice. He must have an ulterior motive. Another added, maybe it's some kind of joke. Each word felt like a needle pricking my skin, but I kept walking, refusing to show how much it hurt. I didn't understand his choice either. Brenton and I existed in completely different worlds. He was the alpha everyone wanted, but nobody could have. Cold, detached, brilliant. I was just another face in the crowd. Someone who blended into the background so well that even teachers sometimes forgot my name. We had never spoken before. He had never even looked at me, as far as I knew. So why now? What game was he playing? The library felt like neutral territory when I arrived for our first official meeting. Brenton was already there, sitting at a corner table with his laptop open, looking as composed as ever. I approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. When I sat down across from him, he finally looked up, and something in his gaze made me uncomfortable, not threatening, but intense, like he was studying me. I chose you because you don't draw attention to yourself, he said without preamble, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. I need someone who will focus on the work, not use this as an opportunity to get close to me. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. It felt like an insult wrapped in practicality, a reminder that I was chosen for my invisibility, not my worth. But there was something in the way he avoided my eyes when he spoke, something that felt inconsistent with his harsh tone. Was he lying, or was I just desperate to believe there was more to this than convenience? The next day brought an unexpected twist. I was sitting alone in the cafeteria, as usual, when Brenton appeared beside my table. Without asking permission, he set his tray down across from me and sat. The entire room seemed to notice at once. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, someone dropped a fork, and the clatter echoed in the sudden silence. I stared at him, confused and mortified by all the attention. "Is there a problem?" he asked coolly, sipping his coffee as if nothing unusual was happening. His composure was infuriating. Didn't he realize what this looked like? Sitting with me publicly was a statement, whether he intended it or not. I shook my head mutely, unable to form words. My mind raced with questions I couldn't voice. Why would he do this? What was he trying to prove? Or was this just another calculated move in whatever strategy he was running? Over the following days, I started noticing things I hadn't before. Brenton watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. In the library, his hand would rest on the table near mine, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin but never quite touching. He would lean in slightly when explaining something, his shoulder brushing against mine for just a fraction of a second before he pulled back, rebuilding that invisible barrier he kept between himself and the world. Each small gesture left me more confused than the last. I wanted to understand him, but I was terrified of asking. What if the answer destroyed whatever fragile connection was forming between us? What if he confirmed that I was just a tool, a convenient choice with no deeper meaning? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Brenton Colt had become a puzzle I couldn't solve, and the not knowing was driving me crazy. Then came the evening that shifted everything. I was leaving the library late, the building nearly empty, when Brenton appeared in my path. He looked different, somehow less guarded, more human. His carefully maintained mask had slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. The harsh fluorescent lights cast shadows across his face, making him look almost haunted. "You need to understand something, Elvis," he said quietly, using my name with a deliberacy that sent shivers down my spine. This was the first time he had spoken it with such weight, such careful attention. "Choosing you might turn out to be the biggest mistake I've ever made." The words landed like stones in my chest, heavy and painful. But it wasn't anger I heard in his voice. It was fear. Raw, genuine fear. And that scared me more than anything else he could have said. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing alone in the empty hallway with those cryptic words echoing in my head. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it had been squeezed in a vice. What did he mean by that? Was he regretting his choice? Was I about to lose whatever strange conscience we had before I even understood what it was? That night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling, replaying every interaction we'd had. His cold dismissal in the library, his unexpected presence in the cafeteria, those almost touches that never quite happened, and finally those devastating words, "biggest mistake." They swirled through my mind in an endless loop, each repetition bringing new questions and deeper confusion. Something was happening between us, something neither of us seemed to control, and I had no idea whether it would save us or destroy us both. His words haunted me through the entire weekend, giving me no peace. "Choosing you might turn out to be the biggest mistake I've ever made." I replayed that sentence 1,000 times, analyzing every syllable, searching for hidden meanings. What kind of mistake? Personal? Academic? Something deeper that I couldn't even imagine. By Monday morning, I had worked myself into a state of anxious exhaustion. When I arrived at school, everything seemed normal on the surface. Brenton sat in his usual spot by the window, earbuds in, deliberately isolated from everyone around him. But nothing felt normal anymore. I sent him a message about our project timeline, keeping it professional and brief. His response came 10 minutes later. Later, just that one word. No explanation, no acknowledgement of what had happened Friday night. That single dismissive word somehow hurt worse than a long explanation would have. It confirmed what I suspected: whatever vulnerability he had shown me was gone, locked away behind his walls again. The morning dragged by painfully slowly. I caught myself watching him during history class, trying to decipher his mood from the set of his shoulders, the angle of his jaw. He never once looked my way. It felt deliberate, this avoidance, like he was working hard to pretend I didn't exist, which was almost funny considering he had created this entire situation by choosing me in the first place. The contradiction made my head hurt. Then, during fourth period English, everything changed again. Miss Peterson announced that we would be doing in-class presentations the following week. Working with our assigned partners, the room buzzed with conversation as people began planning. I expected Brenton to ignore the announcement entirely, but instead, he stood up and walked directly to my desk. Every eye in the room followed his movements. He crouched beside my chair, bringing himself to my eye level, and spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. "You should take the lead on this presentation. I'll handle research and visual materials, but the speaking part is yours." There was something different in his voice, a softness I hadn't heard before, almost like respect. It caught me completely off guard. Before I could formulate a response, he was already walking back to his seat, leaving me speechless and confused once again. That evening, we met at the library as planned. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. We sat across from each other at our usual table, surrounded by textbooks and notes, trying to focus on work while dancing around the elephant in the room. For the first hour, we maintained the pretense of normalcy. Brenton outlined his research findings. I took notes on presentation structure. We were professionals. Nothing more. But then my pen ran out of ink. Without thinking, I reached for the spare one sitting between us, and so did Brenton. Our fingers touched just for a heartbeat, just long enough for me to feel the warmth of his skin and the slight tremor that ran through his hand. He jerked back as if burned, his eyes going wide and dark with something that looked dangerously close to panic. The pen clattered onto the table between us. "Forgot." "I'm sorry," I whispered automatically, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Touching him, existing, making him feel whatever he was feeling. He didn't respond with words. Instead, he stared at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. like he was trying to memorize every detail of my face or maybe trying to understand something that confused him as much as it confused me. The silence stretched uncomfortably until I couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you choose me, Brenton?" The question burst out before I could stop it, desperate and raw. "I need to know, please." My voice cracked on that last word, exposing more vulnerability than I intended. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible, he said, "Because you're safe." The word hung in the air between us, strange and insufficient. Safe? What did that even mean? Safe from what? For what purpose? His expression gave nothing away, but his hands were clenched into fists on the table, knuckles white with tension. "I don't understand," I admitted softly, hoping he would elaborate. Instead, he began packing up his materials with jerky, too quick movements that betrayed his agitation. "We should call it a night. I'll see you tomorrow, Elvis." This time when he said my name, it sounded almost tender, like a secret he was sharing despite himself. That tiny shift in tone gave me hope even as he walked away, leaving me alone with my confusion and 100 unanswered questions. Walking home, I couldn't stop thinking about that word, safe. The more I considered it, the less sense it made. Brenton Colt was the most intimidating person I knew. Powerful, controlled, seemingly invincible. What could he possibly need protection from? Unless he wasn't talking about physical safety. Maybe he meant emotional safety. Maybe I was safe because I didn't expect anything from him, didn't demand he be anything other than what he was. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brenton's face in that moment after we touched, the flash of fear, the desperate desire, the war happening behind his carefully controlled expression. Something was building between us. Something neither of us had asked for but couldn't seem to stop. It terrified me because I had no idea where it would lead or what it would cost us. The next morning brought another surprise. During chemistry class, a folded piece of paper landed on my desk. I recognized Brenton's neat handwriting immediately. "Tonight, my place. We need to talk about the project." But there was something added in smaller letters at the bottom, almost as an afterthought. "Just us. No distractions." My pulse kicked up several notches. His place. Alone. This felt like crossing a threshold we couldn't uncross. I looked across the classroom to where Brenton sat, but he was determinedly focused on his textbook, refusing to meet my gaze. His neck was slightly flushed though, a tiny crack in his armor that told me he was just as affected by this invitation as I was. This wasn't just about the project anymore. We both knew it. The wall between us was still there, solid and imposing, but now I could see the cracks forming. Soon something would have to give. The question was whether we would be ready when it finally broke. Brenton's house matched him perfectly. All clean lines, muted colors, and careful control. When he opened the door to let me in, I was struck immediately by how different he looked in his own space. Not softer exactly, but less armored. He wore a simple gray shirt instead of his usual button-up, and his hair was slightly disheveled, like he had been running his hands through it. "Come in," he said, stepping aside to let me pass. As I crossed the threshold, his scent hit me like a physical force, cedarwood and something sharper, almost metallic, distinctly alpha. My Omega instincts responded before I could stop them, making my skin feel too warm and my breath come faster. I followed him through a minimalist living room into a home office that was clearly his sanctuary. Books lined one wall, organized with military precision. A massive desk dominated the space, holding dual monitors and neat stacks of papers. Everything had its place. Everything was controlled, just like him. We settled into chairs on opposite sides of the desk, the computer screen between us like a shield. For a while we actually worked on the project. Brenton pulled up his research, walking me through data sets and analysis with the kind of focused intensity that had earned him top grades in every class. I found myself genuinely interested in his insights, impressed despite myself. When he leaned forward to point something out on the screen, his arm brushed against mine, and I felt that same electric charge from the library. This time he didn't immediately pull away. The contact lasted 3 heartbeats before he slowly withdrew, his jaw tightening. "Your scent is stronger today," he said suddenly, his eyes still fixed on the computer screen. The observation was clinical, almost scientific, but the slight roughness in his voice betrayed him. I felt heat flood my face. Omega's sense intensified with emotion, and right now I was a mess of nerves and anticipation and something I didn't want to name. Is that a problem? I managed to ask, trying to sound calmer than I felt. He finally looked at me, and the raw hunger in his eyes stole my breath. Yes. And no. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair hard enough that I could see the tendons standing out in his wrists. It's a problem because it's distracting. It's not a problem because he trailed off, seeming to wrestle with himself. The silence grew heavy with unspoken things. I made a decision then, driven by something reckless and brave. Because what, Brenton? I pushed, refusing to let him retreat this time. Finish the sentence. We were past the point of pretending this was just about schoolwork. The project had become an excuse, a flimsy reason to be near each other that neither of us really believed anymore. Because I like it, he admitted, the words sounding like they were torn from somewhere deep inside him. I like knowing that I affect you. I like that your body responds to my presence even when you're trying to stay in control. It makes me feel less. He paused, searching for the right word. Less alone in this. My heart was racing now, so fast I felt dizzy. Alone in what? I needed him to say it, to put words to the thing that was consuming both of us. He closed the laptop with a decisive click, removing the last barrier between us. When he stood and moved around the desk toward me, I couldn't have looked away if my life depended on it. He stopped just inches from my chair, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. And wanting something I shouldn't want, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. And feeling things that go against every rule I've set for myself. His hand came up slowly, giving me time to object, and then his fingers were brushing against my cheek with devastating gentleness. The touch sent sparks racing across my skin. What rules? I asked breathlessly, leaning into his hand without conscious thought. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, and I watched his pupils dilate in response. Tell me what rules you're breaking. I needed to understand what was holding him back, what made him push and pull like the tide. The rule that says I can't have you, he said simply. The rule that says getting close to someone is weakness. The rule that says alphas like me don't fall for ordinary omegas who should mean nothing. Each word landed like a confession. But you're not ordinary, Elvis. And you mean too much. That's the problem. I stood up slowly, bringing us chest to chest. He didn't step back. Maybe, I said carefully, you've been following the wrong rules. My boldness surprised even me. But something about being in his space, seeing him vulnerable like this, made me brave. Maybe some rules are meant to be broken. His breathing had gone ragged. If I break these rules, he warned, his other hand coming up to frame my face, there's no going back. I won't be able to pretend anymore. I won't be able to keep my distance. The intensity in his gaze was almost frightening. I'll want more. I'll want everything, and I don't know if I can handle what that means. Then don't handle it alone, I whispered, rising on my toes to close the remaining distance between us. Let me help carry it. For a moment we stayed frozen like that, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. I could see the war playing out across his features. Fear battling with desire, control struggling against instinct. Then something in him snapped. God help me, he breathed. And then his lips were on mine, tentative at first, almost questioning before deepening into something desperate and demanding. I kissed him back with everything I had, my hands fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. He responded by wrapping his arms around my waist, hauling me against him with a possessiveness that should have scared me but instead felt like coming home. When we finally broke apart, both gasping for air, his forehead pressed against mine. This changes everything, he said hoarsely. You understand that, right? After tonight, I won't be able to go back to pretending you don't matter. Everyone will know. There was a question hidden in that statement. A last chance for me to back out before we crossed this line completely. Good, I answered, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of wondering. If this is real, then let's stop hiding it. His eyes searched mine for a long moment before a slow smile, the first real smile I had ever seen from him, transformed his face. It made him look younger, lighter, almost happy, and in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, whatever consequences we faced, This was worth it. He was worth it. The morning after our kiss, I woke up with Brenton's taste still lingering on my lips and panic settling in my chest. What had we done? In his living room, caught up in the heat of the moment, everything had felt right and inevitable. But now, in the cold light of day, reality crashed down on me. We had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. At school, everyone would see, they would know. The whispers that had followed me since he chose me as his partner would become a roar. I wasn't sure I was strong enough to weather that storm. I arrived at school early, hoping to catch Brenton before classes started, needing to talk about what happened and what it meant for us going forward. But when I reached his usual spot by the east windows, he wasn't there. I checked the library, the computer lab, even the parking lot. Nothing. My messages went unanswered. By the time first period started, a sick feeling had settled in my stomach. Was he avoiding me? Had he woken up with the same panic, decided this was a mistake after all? The day dragged on with agonizing slowness. I caught a glimpse of him once between classes, his tall frame disappearing around a corner before I could call out. It felt deliberate, this absence, like he was working hard to make sure our paths didn't cross. Each hour that passed without contact felt like confirmation of my worst fears. He regretted everything. The vulnerability he'd shown me, the desperate kiss, the promises whispered in the dark, all of it had evaporated in the harsh light of reality. By lunch I had convinced myself it was over before it really began. I sat alone at my usual table, pushing food around my plate without eating, trying to ignore the curious stares from other students who had probably noticed Brenton's sudden distance. My phone buzzed, and I grabbed it with embarrassing eagerness, only to find a message from my mom asking about dinner plans. The disappointment was crushing. Then, during fourth period chemistry, something changed. Mr. Harrison was droning on about molecular bonds when my phone vibrated against my thigh. I glanced down carefully, not wanting to get caught. The message was from Brenton. Rooftop. End of this period. Please. That single word, please, sent my heart racing. Brenton Colt never said please. He commanded, he stated, he informed. But he never begged. The moment the bell rang, I was out of my seat and heading for the stairs. The rooftop was technically off limits, accessible only through a maintenance door that was supposed to be locked but never was. It had become a sanctuary for students who needed to escape, a place where the rules didn't quite reach. When I pushed through the door, the afternoon sun momentarily blinded me. Brenton stood at the far edge, looking out over the city skyline. His shoulders were rigid with tension, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He didn't turn when I approached, but I knew he'd heard me. The air between us crackled with everything unsaid. I thought you were avoiding me, I said, breaking the silence. My voice came out steadier than I felt. All day you've been a ghost. It wasn't an accusation exactly, but it wasn't neutral either. I needed him to explain, to give me something to hold on to. He turned then, and what I saw in his face made my breath catch. He looked wrecked, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, jaw tight with stress, his usual careful composure completely shattered. He admitted roughly. I spent all night trying to convince myself to stay away from you, trying to remember all the reasons this is complicated and messy and potentially disastrous. He took a step toward me. But here's what I realized. I don't care about those reasons anymore. My pulse thundered in my ears. What are you saying? I needed him to spell it out, to leave no room for misinterpretation. We were past the point of vague implications and careful half-truths. I'm saying I want you, Elvis. Not as a project partner, not as some temporary distraction. I want you in a way that terrifies me because I've never wanted anything this badly. His eyes bared with intensity. Do you understand what that means in our world? For an alpha to openly claim an omega? I did understand, in the social hierarchy of our school. Such pairings happened all the time, but they followed unspoken rules. Alphas chose omegas who enhanced their status, who fit a certain mold of desirability. I fit none of those criteria. For Brenton to choose me publicly would be seen as either incomprehensible or scandalous, possibly both. Are you asking my permission? I asked quietly, moving closer until only a foot of space separated us. Because if you are, the answer is yes. I've been yours since the moment you called my name in that classroom, even when I didn't know it yet. Something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. "I need you to be certain," he insisted, his voice dropping to almost a growl. "Once I stake this claim, I won't let go. Other alphas will challenge it. People will question your worth. It won't be easy." His hands came out of his pockets, reaching for me but stopping just short of contact, like he was holding himself back by sheer willpower. I closed the remaining distance, pressing my palm flat against his chest where I could feel his heart hammering. "I'm not afraid of difficulties," I told him firmly. "I'm only afraid of walking away from this without knowing what we could be. So stop trying to protect me from your feelings and just let yourself feel them." The restraint in him snapped like a physical thing breaking. His arms came around me, crushing me against him as his mouth found mine in a kiss that was nothing like the tentative exploration from yesterday. This was claiming, branding, marking me as his in every way that mattered before the physical bond was even made. I kissed him back with equal fervor, my fingers tangling in his hair, my body molding against his like we were two pieces finally finding their fit. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. "Tomorrow," he said hoarsely, "tomorrow everyone will know. I'm going to walk into that school holding your hand, and I'm not going to pretend anymore. Are you ready for that?" His question was both a warning and a promise. "I've been ready," I answered, and I meant it. Whatever storm was coming, we would face it together. His lips curved into a smile against my temple, and for the first time since all this I felt truly certain. This wasn't a mistake or a momentary madness. This was real, and it was ours, and no amount of outside judgment could change that fundamental truth. Tomorrow everything would change, but standing there in his arms, with the wind whipping around us and the city spread out below, I couldn't wait. The next morning felt like preparing for battle. I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual, second-guessing every choice. Would this shirt make me look like I was trying too hard? Did these jeans make me seem too casual for someone claiming the attention of Brenton Colt? Finally, I forced myself to stop. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had kept me invisible for so long. Brenton wanted me as I was, not some polished version I could never maintain. My phone buzzed with a message. "Waiting outside. Take your time." I looked out my window and felt my heart stutter. Brenton's sleek black car sat at the curb, and he was leaning against it, looking unfairly perfect in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater. He had come to pick me up. This was really happening. The ride to school was quiet but not uncomfortable. Brenton's hand rested on the gear shift, and halfway through the drive, I reached over and laced my fingers through his. He glanced at me with a soft expression I was still getting used to seeing on his usually stoic face. "Last chance to back out," he said lightly, but I could hear the underlying tension. He was nervous too, I realized. Maybe not about us, but about what his choice would mean for me. "Drive faster," I responded, squeezing his hand. "I want to get this part over with." He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound filled something in me I hadn't known was empty. The school parking lot was already filling up when we arrived. Brenton parked in his usual spot, killed the engine, and then turned to face me fully. "Once we get out of this car, there's no taking it back," he said seriously. "People will talk. Some will be cruel. I need you to promise me something. Don't let them make you doubt what we have. Their opinions don't define our reality." "I promise," I said, meaning it completely. "Now stop stalling and let's do this." He smiled at my boldness, then got out and walked around to open my door. When I got out, he immediately took my hand, his grip firm and unmistakable. Together we walked toward the main building. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned so quickly I was surprised no one got whiplash. I could feel the weight of dozens of stares, hear the sharp intake of breath from multiple directions. Brenton kept walking, his stride confident and unhurried, pulling me along beside him like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Is that Elvis Martin?" someone whispered loudly enough to be heard. "With Brenton Colt? Holding hands?" The disbelief in her voice was almost comical. We reached the main hallway, and the crowd that typically parted for Brenton seemed to grow thicker, everyone wanting a closer look at this unexpected development. "Ignore them," Brenton murmured, though he must have known that was impossible. How could I ignore the shockwaves we were creating? But I kept my chin up, my hand steady in his, refusing to show weakness. If I was going to be part of Brenton's life, I needed to develop a thicker skin quickly. We made it to my locker without incident, though the whispers followed us like a living thing. Brenton leaned against the locker beside mine, creating a small bubble of privacy through sheer force of presence. "You're doing great," he said quietly, and the approval in his voice made my chest warm. "I haven't done anything except walk and breathe," I pointed out, grabbing my books for first period. He smiled at that, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture so wholly intimate that it made my breath hitch. "Sometimes that's enough," he replied. Then the first bell rang, shattering our moment. We separated for our different classes, but not before he pressed a quick kiss to my temple, a public claim that sent another ripple of shock through the onlookers. I walked to history class feeling like I was floating, but reality came crashing back during lunch. I had assumed Brenton and I would sit together, but when I entered the cafeteria, I found him at his usual table, surrounded by the elite crowd he typically tolerated rather than welcomed. He saw me immediately and stood, gesturing for me to join him. The invitation was clear. Walking across that cafeteria felt like crossing a minefield. Every table I passed fell silent, watching my progress. When I reached Brenton's table, several of his usual companions looked at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to thinly veiled hostility, but he pulled out the chair next to his and waited until I sat before reclaiming his own seat, his hand immediately finding mine on the table. The silence was oppressive until Blake Morrison broke it. Blake was everything I wasn't: polished, confident, beautiful in a way that made people stare. He had been pursuing Brenton since freshman year with single-minded determination, and now he was looking at me like I was an insect he wanted to crush. "Well, this is unexpected," Blake said, his tone dripping with false sweetness. "Brenton, darling, when you said you valued privacy, I didn't realize you meant you were hiding this." The emphasis on this made his disgust clear. Several people at the table shifted uncomfortably. "Blake," Brenton's voice cut through the tension like a knife, sharp and warning. "Choose your next words very carefully." There was a threat underlying the statement, a reminder of exactly who held power in this dynamic. But Blake either didn't hear it or didn't care. "I'm just confused," Blake continued, turning his attention fully to me now. "What exactly is it about you that caught his attention? Because from where I'm sitting, you're remarkably unremarkable. No offense, of course." The smile he gave me was venomous. Before I could formulate a response, Brenton stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Elvis, let's go," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We're not eating here." He didn't wait for Blake's response, didn't engage with the provocation. He simply took my hand and walked away, leaving the table and its occupants behind. We ended up outside, sitting on a bench in the courtyard, sharing the sandwich I'd packed. The fresh air and relative privacy eased some of the tension from Brenton's shoulders. "I'm sorry about Blake," he said finally. "He doesn't handle rejection well, and seeing us together pushes all his buttons." "It's fine," I said, though it wasn't. Not really. Blake's words had found their mark, awakening every insecurity I'd been trying to suppress. What did make me special enough for this? But Brenton must have read something in my expression, because he turned to face me fully, his hands framing my face with unexpected gentleness. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "You are not unremarkable. You are not a phase or an experiment or a mistake. You are the first person who ever made me want to be something other than alone. That makes you extraordinary, and I will spend however long it takes convincing you of that truth." 3 weeks after our public declaration, Brenton brought up the bonding ceremony. We were at his house, ostensibly working on homework, but actually just existing in each other's space, the way we'd grown comfortable doing. He was reading a physics textbook while I sketched aimlessly in my notebook, both of us content with the peaceful silence. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "I want to bond with you properly, permanently." I dropped my pencil. We had talked around the subject before, acknowledged the eventual inevitability of it, but hearing him state it so directly made it suddenly startlingly real. Bonding wasn't like dating or even like the casual claiming marks some couples exchanged. It was irreversible, a biological and emotional merger that tied two people together for life. "That's a big step," I said carefully, watching his face for any sign of doubt. Are you absolutely certain? Because once it's done, there's no undoing it. You'd be stuck with me forever. I tried to keep my tone light, but the weight of the decision pressed down on both of us. Brenton set down his textbook and moved to sit beside me on the couch, close enough that our thighs touched. I've never been more certain of anything, he said with quiet conviction. These past few weeks with you have shown me what my life was missing. Before you, I was just existing, going through motions, keeping everyone at arm's length because it was safer. But you made me want more. You made me want everything. His words melted something inside me that I'd been holding rigid. When I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, when do you want to do this? Part of me expected him to suggest waiting until after graduation, giving us time to be absolutely sure. This weekend, he answered, surprising me again. I don't want to wait anymore. Every day that passes without that bond feels like a day wasted. I want you to be mine in every way that matters, and I want the world to see the mark and know that you're claimed, protected, cherished. The ceremony itself was smaller and more intimate than I'd imagined. Traditional bonding ceremonies often involved family and friends, elaborate rituals and public witnesses. But Brenton had arranged something private just for us. We stood in his bedroom with candles casting flickering shadows on the walls and soft music playing from his speakers. The moonlight streaming through the window provided the only other illumination. Are you ready? He asked, his hands gentle on my shoulders. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He guided me to sit on the edge of his bed, then knelt in front of me so we were at eye level. This is going to hurt for a moment, he warned softly. But after that, you'll feel everything I feel. You'll know, without any doubt, exactly how much you mean to me. When his teeth sank into the junction of my neck and shoulder, the pain was sharp and immediate, making me gasp. But it faded quickly, replaced by something else entirely. A rush of sensation and emotion that wasn't my own. I could feel Brenton's love for me, vast and deep and absolutely certain. I could feel his fear of losing me, his determination to protect me, his overwhelming need to keep me close. It was beautiful and terrifying and more than I'd ever imagined. Your turn, he whispered, tilting his head to expose his neck. My hands trembled as I leaned forward, hesitating for just a second before letting my instincts take over. The moment my teeth broke his skin, the bond snapped into place fully, a connection that thrummed between us like a living thing. I could feel his heart beating in sync with mine, could sense his emotions as clearly as my own. We stayed like that for a long moment, forehead to forehead, adjusting to the new awareness of each other. I love you, Brenton said, the words coming easier now that I could feel the truth of them through our bond. I've loved you for longer than I've admitted even to myself. I love you too, I replied, the words feeling both momentous and natural. I think I started falling that first day in the library, when you looked at me like I was more than invisible. He smiled at that, pulling me into a kiss that was different now, deeper, because we could feel what it meant to each other. The following Monday at school, the bonding marks were visible to everyone. Unlike the temporary claiming marks some couples wore, these were permanent silvery scars that would never fully fade. They marked us as bonded, as permanently and irrevocably pair. The reaction was mixed but intense. Some students congratulated us, genuinely happy to see Brenton find someone. Others were skeptical, placing bets on how long it would last before Brenton got tired of me. Blake refused to acknowledge my existence entirely, which was honestly a relief. But through it all, I could feel Brenton's steady presence in the back of my mind, a constant reassurance that I wasn't facing any of this alone. The bond changed things in unexpected ways. I could tell when Brenton was stressed during a test, even if he was 3 classrooms away. He knew when I was uncomfortable in a social situation and would somehow appear to extract me. We developed a wordless communication that made other students stare in confusion. It was invasive in some ways, having someone so completely intertwined with your emotional state. But I wouldn't have changed it for anything. One evening, about a month after the bonding, we found ourselves back on the school rooftop where so much of our story had unfolded. We sat with our backs against the wall, watching the sun set over the city, my head resting on his shoulder. Do you remember what you said that night in the library? I asked quietly. When you first called choosing me a mistake, I felt his wince through the bond, the remembered shame of that moment. I was an idiot, he said firmly. Scared and trying to push you away before you could mean too much. Obviously that plan failed spectacularly. I could hear the smile in his voice, the self-deprecating humor. I'm glad it failed, I admitted. I'm glad you were brave enough to stop running from this. His arm tightened around me, pulling me closer against his side. I'm glad you were patient enough to wait for me to catch up, he countered. You could have walked away a dozen times and no one would have blamed you. But you stayed and you fought for us even when I was fighting against myself. We sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars emerge one by one. Our bond hummed contentedly between us, a constant reminder that we were no longer two separate people navigating the world alone. We were a unit now, bound together by choice and biology and love. The future stretched out before us, uncertain in its details but absolutely certain in one crucial way. We would face it together, bonded permanently, two halves of one whole, and that was more than enough.